welcome to Coffee and Catholics, a Catholic women's talk show podcast. I'm Stacy, one of your hosts, and with me I have...
Hi, I'm Alicia.
And I'm Noelle.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Lauren.
Hello, and welcome to Coffee and Catholics. Today we're missing Alicia and Annie, but we have a guest speaker with us, Tiffany. I'll let her tell us most of her story, but she is a convert to Catholicism, and she now has a blog. So I'll go ahead and let Tiffany tell us a little bit about herself, and then thanks for coming.
No, my family was nominally Christian. That I grew up thinking that they were ultra Christian, but I didn't really know anyone more so. Does that make any sense? We didn't go to church. I only went like a few times in my life as a kid, and I think like once was with a neighbor. My mom took me a few times when she was like shopping around for churches, but didn't find one she liked, I guess. Other than that, we celebrated like Christmas and Easter, but it was really like there wasn't really any talk of religion during that, except like my mom had a nativity scene. But yeah, no, I knew that my parents were Christian. I knew that we were supposed to be Christian. I had a few children's Bibles. No one ever read them to me or anything. So they were there with all of the books. I didn't know that it was supposed to be real. Like, I just thought they were stories. That's all I really knew about Christianity. I didn't know much at all.
Did your family pray at all together or anything?
No.
When you would look at these stories or picture books, or just like I'm sure you just treated it like a picture book.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of God? Like, what do you remember? Any impressions you had about God as a child, just from what you'd heard, just from the basic Bible stories?
Not really. I just thought they were fiction until my mom started taking me to church, just like those couple of times. And I remember, and I don't know when this, but at some point we were driving home from church, and I was in the back seat, and I asked her, "How do you know God is real if you can't see Him?" I think that was the first time like I really realized they were trying to teach me truth, and I started questioning it very young. I've always been a skeptic. So, and she told me something like, you can't see electricity, but that's real. And so that kind of shut me up, but it didn't remove my doubts because, well, for one, I had been electrocuted as a child. So I don't know if you remember that.
Here, that's not right.
Well, I stuck keys in a socket, so so I knew pretty well that electricity was a thing.
That does, yes.
Yeah.
So then, what happened when you were in high school? Is that when you kind of started moving towards atheism, or when was that kind of? Or do you feel like you had gravitated before it, but were finally able to articulate, I am an atheist? Like what?
Actually, there was kind of a middle stage. In about 8th grade, I had a friend who got me into Wicca, into the occult. And so we started, messing around with that, and, spells and things like that. And kind of got me into the more rebellious phase of my life. And I took off from there. I became very rebellious, dressing goth, and, I stopped wanting to go to church or to, not that we went all that often, but I stopped wanting to go to family gatherings. Like, I started really, kind of shunning my family, which I feel terrible about now, but they're great people. But, I don't know, I just got really rebellious at that point, and it must have been, the occult influence on me, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's making a big comeback too. That we're gonna have to do that for a later podcast.
Yes, we need to talk a lot about that. So it's interesting that you attribute that now, looking back as an adult, directly to rebellion. Mm-hmm. Like that was sort of your gateway to rebel against everything.
Yeah, I think so. I was a really shy, anxious. Now, no, I'm a child. I was really shy and anxious as a child. I felt really uncomfortable in my skin all the time, and I didn't know why, and it made me mad, and, my family's kind of they joke around and tease each other, and I took that stuff really personally, and I would just really internalize that stuff and get more and more angry inside me, and then just take it out on them. I don't think I ever really did anything, I just, retreated into myself.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting though, because one of the things that I think is the draw to Wicca is that spiritual hunger, the feeling like you're not getting that spiritual hunger fed, and so you kind of take matters into your own hands to start trying to do that. So even though it's like we always are like, oh no, stay away, it's devil. In a way, it's that same hunger of Adam and Eve had, like to be in control, I guess, you know.
Yep.
And so that's an interesting part of your journey that really is kind of maybe where that hunger really started to manifest, even if you didn't recognize it as that.
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But it definitely, it was my first experience of spirituality. Like, it was my first experience of prayer. That's kind of how I learned to pray, sadly.
A ritual.
Praying to the wrong gods. But yeah, exactly. Ritual and the incense and all that kind of stuff that kind of, I don't know, just takes you out of all of your difficulties and lets you focus on something else for a while. That had a very powerful influence on me.
When did that start to turn sour for you? When did it start to when did you start to leave that behind or realize that this was destructive in your life?
So that was in 8th grade, and then at maybe that summer or something, I moved away, and I went to a brand new high school, and it was really hard on me as like the shy kid, not having any friends there or anything, and so like I started to connect with the other people there who were kind of like me, who were kind of weird and off and dressed different, and so I gravitated towards them, and like some of them were into like occult practices and stuff like that, but they were more into just goofing around being teenagers at that point, and so like that's kind of what I got into too. It's like, so I don't know, I just stopped thinking about it for a while, but I still was like, thought it was cool, thought it was neat, but then I just stopped believing in it, just gradually over time. It's just like, none of the spells ever worked, you know, like why would I? My skepticism started coming back as I, got away from just like the excitement of it.
So when did you start looking into the Catholic Church?
That's way later. I actually went through a period of agnosticism, just not really believing in anything after all that. I was kind of like later teenage years and getting into college. Right before college, I started dating an atheist and hanging out with his atheist friends. And, I would have debates with them on what was better, atheism or agnosticism. And,
Just curious.
I mean, I felt like, they won. They convinced me. I started reading books out of the New Atheist movement, like Richard Dawkins and stuff like that. The God Delusion. Finally, I think it was a discussion with one of my atheist friends who basically was just like, it taught me the difference between, belief and knowledge. Agnosticism is talking about what you know, you don't know. Whereas atheism is a belief, you don't believe. And so that was kind of the line where he's just like, so, you could be agnostic either if you're a Christian or anything, like, that just means you don't know. What do you actually believe? And honestly, I don't even know if he said that or if it was just something like I extrapolated from what he said in my thought process, and I just realized like I don't actually believe after all. Reading all this and talking to all these people, like I don't believe in it. None of the magic stuff work. Why would this be real?
Was religion talked about at all in your college classes, or was it more of like a negative experience of that?
That was the other thing. Like I got into. I kind of bounced around majors at first. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started as a math major and just started taking a bunch of different classes because that intimidated me, sadly. I should have just stuck with it. But I took an anthropology class and just loved it. And I had this amazing instructor. And he ended up becoming my mentor. And I ended up graduating with an anthropology degree. So, I took a lot of classes studying other people's religions, comparative mythology, and that kind of stuff. So I was kind of in this weird place where, in anthropology, they really push relativism, cultural relativism, You can't judge other people's cultures from your own perspective, that kind of thing. And so I was kind of in this place where I was wanting to be open-minded and not judging, but also I didn't believe it all. And then I started getting into, I had a friend, an atheist friend, invite me to a skeptics group in college. And that was basically like, we'd do skeptics in the pub every week. And we'd get together and we'd talk about science and philosophy and make fun of religion.
We sometimes do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do that. I was thinking theology on tap in college. We did that too.
And so I got really involved in the skeptics group and like pushed my atheism even further, you know. And then I moved to Oklahoma, and my ex-husband was military and he was stationed here. So I moved to Oklahoma, and I didn't know anyone, and I wanted that kind of atmosphere back. So I joined a skeptics group here, and an atheist group here also. And like they didn't have very many members, so I offered to help build them up. So I actually helped build up the skeptics and atheist groups here.
So you're always a natural born evangelist,
Yeah.
I feel like. You're always bringing people together. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's an awesome thing.
Yeah, no, I was in student government, like stuff like that. I've always enjoyed building groups. It's kind
She's
of
an
thing.
anthropologist.
I
Yeah.
know.
She gathers people
Gathers
together.
people.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
That's what I do. I actually met my husband, who's a Catholic. That's the Catholic connection. Through when I started that skeptics group. I didn't start it. I just helped build it up. I put them on meetup.com, which got a ton of people to start coming to these skeptics in the pub meetings. But at the time, you could create 3 groups with one account. So I started a couple of other groups, and one of my other groups is where I met my husband.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so was he kind of reluctant knowing you were an atheist, or did he care, or how was that?
I think it probably weirded him out, but you know, he liked me, so
Yeah.
we just didn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
Like once we got together really fast and got married really fast and all that stuff.
So you met your current husband in one of these groups, and you said you guys got together fairly quickly. So when in your relationship did you start thinking, well, Catholicism doesn't sound so bad?
I actually bugged him constantly from the beginning, like wanting to know why he believed, and he didn't want to talk about it because he knew I was a fervent atheist and that I'd been in these skeptics groups and things, and he knew he wasn't going to change his mind. I thought I could change his mind, so I really wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, right.
So I kept kind of pushing it, and he just kept pushing it off, and I think it was with our first son. Before he was born, I was asking, okay, are you going to want to get our kids baptized? Because I don't. And he's like, well, yeah, I kind of always thought my kids would be baptized. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll plan the party.
Right.
It was kind of this weird thing. Like I said, my anthropology background is like, well, I'm not going to antagonize him. I want to respect his culture, his religion.
Yeah.
I don't want to raise my kids this way, but if I could, but I also want to be kind and I want to respect him.
Yep.
So I decided, okay, we'll get the kids baptized, but I don't want to raise them Christian, but we'll get them baptized. And so I had to take a baptism class, but I honestly don't remember that very much. And we got him baptized, and we had the party and all that, and I didn't really think on it all that much. And it was a couple of years later that the RCIA director at that church, it was St. Eugene's, she mentioned to my mother-in-law that I should check out RCIA and, just to learn. And so my mother-in-law told my husband that, and my husband told me that, and I was annoyed.
Yeah.
But I was trying to be like, not, I'm not really interested. But in my head, I'm like, I'm not going to change my mind. They're just trying to, I don't know what's the word. They're just trying to convince me, or it's not going to work. I don't want to be pushed into this. No one was pushing me. It was just a suggestion to learn more. And then, so I got pregnant with my second son, and after he was born, so he was born in December 2018, and it was January 2019 that the Reproductive Health Act passed in New York, and, where they could have abortions through all 9 months of pregnancy. And I heard about that through my husband's Catholic aunt through Facebook. She was posting about it. And that just shocked me because, I was pro-choice, firmly pro-choice. Like, used to post about, I support Planned Parenthood and all this stuff. And I had just had a baby, and I'd followed through 9 months of watching my apps and watching the growth and seeing ultrasounds and feeling him move and kick and hiccup. It's like I knew he was alive, while I was pregnant. It just kind of it came to me as like a duh moment. It's like I finally connected the two concepts. I hadn't thought about it with my first pregnancy because I wasn't thinking about abortion. No one brought that up.
Right.
So I finally just connected the dots, and I was just horrified that they're doing that. It's like, well, I thought it was just a clump of cells. What do you mean you can do this through all 9 months of pregnancy? And so I pretty quickly converted to pro-lifeism, still as an atheist. That really opened my mind to like, okay, well, what else am I wrong about? And I started really like listening to other perspectives a lot more than I used to, and starting to agree with people that I used to almost hate.
Was there a pro-life influencer or person that you started to really follow during that time?
Yeah, actually, Live Action.
Oh, yeah.
Lila Rose. I joined the Live Action Ambassador group. Yeah, she's awesome. They have a group called Live Action Ambassadors. It's a private group on Facebook, and you have to apply to get in. And it's just like a support group, supporting each other and sharing resources and stuff like that. And that's how I met Alicia, because she was in that group too. Yeah. And I saw her posting asking people if they wanted to go around and show like abortion procedures videos in OKC. And I was like, no, I don't, but hi. I don't want to do that. I'm not ready to do that yet. But I want to know you. And I'm like, that's really cool that there's someone around here who has the same passion. And I started kind of like Googling, trying to figure out like, where are the pro-lifers around here? And I just really struggled to find anyone. Sorry. That was like right before you started, I think.
Yeah, we found each other around the same time. We were all looking for
exactly.
pro-life community.
Well, so I started a pro-life community on Facebook, just wanting to bring people together. And I started, I found the 40 Days for Life website, and I started messaging them through that and saying, hey, I've got this Facebook group if you all want to join. And I think through a chain of people who, someone knew that, they invited people who invited people. I then met Beth, who is Annie's mom, and one of my closest friends. I love her so much. She's the best. Yeah. She like really kicked off the pro-life community. She invited everyone. People. And like I had invited like 8 people. I mean, Beth really got it started. And so I invited her to be a moderator. Anyway, so I invited Beth to be a moderator of the pro-life community. So she was my first. So we were like, that was the first admin team. Was me and Beth, strategizing and talking about it. And I started talking to her about my faith stuff as well. And that, I guess we've kind of gotten off track because all this was kind of happening at the same time: the pro-life stuff and the Catholic stuff. Well,
that's usually how God. That's kind of like how God works, though. Like he works where you're at. So
So I started talking to Beth, just like messaging with her on Facebook. We met in person a couple times, but I started mostly messaging with her and just telling her a little bit about my history, and she was just so supportive and so nice.
She's amazing.
Well, I know that I met you at one of Lauren's retreats, and because Alicia already knew you through Facebook. And so she introduced us, and I had come with a friend of mine from Tulsa, and so I was like, and Alicia was there, so I'm like, oh, okay. And that's how you and I first met. And I remember you were in RCIA, but you hadn't decided whether or not you were going to become Catholic yet. You were still discerning.
I was still an atheist at that point. Like I emailed Lauren and was like, hey, I'm an atheist. Can I still come?
To this day, that is my favorite email I've ever gotten. Ever is saved. Because one day when your cause is coming up for instance, I'm going to say, this, I have corresponded. No, I joked. It was really fun. It was really fun.
Well, that's cool. Because I went to a theology on tap. I guess I got to backtrack a little bit because I was becoming pro-life, or I became pro-life pretty quickly at the beginning of the year. And we were planning my son's baptism, my second son's baptism. And this time, like, I was being really selfish, and I wanted someone from my side of the family to be godparents. But, like, I didn't know all of the rules. So I started, like, they started telling me, okay, they have to be Catholic. I'm like, okay, I have some Catholic family, like my mom's side. And so I kind of started feeling that out and figuring out who's Catholic. And then, I found out that they had to be like a Catholic in good standing, like, married in the church and all that kind of stuff. And so there ended up being no one from my side of the family that I could have as a godparent. And so we started looking at my husband's family again. And his family's Catholic. And we still struggled. And it's just the people that we were looking at, they still have things that they need to take care of. They needed an annulment or something like that. And so we found someone, perfect person actually. We should have thought of her in the first place. She's my husband's goddaughter. One of his goddaughters is now the godmother to my second son. But this whole process made me feel like, okay, I need to learn more about this. If I'm going to be dealing with Catholics, Catholic events and things like this, then I feel like I need to know. And I need to know, what are my kids going to be learning from family members and stuff like that, like, because I was concerned. I was like, I had this idea of Christians as being, indoctrinated from childhood. And like a negative association. I thought Christianity was bad. Especially after reading all the new atheism books and stuff like that. So I signed up for RCIA, but that was like in April or May that I decided to sign up. And the class doesn't start till August. And I can't wait. I'm impatient. So I just started researching. And we have YouTube now. I didn't have that, or it wasn't popularized back in college. So, I started watching apologetics things and learning all about Catholicism. And then also, like, I was really missing the community aspect of the skeptics in the pub. And it's like, I can't go back to the skeptics. They're kind of attached to my ex-husband, and it was weird. And so my husband said, well, there's this thing called Theology on Tap. He mentioned. And I'm like, what's that? Cool. You mean a group of people that get together and talk? Okay. And he's like, well, you could check the church that's closest to us. Like, we had our kids baptized at St. Eugene's. It was kind of far from us. So he's like, St. John's is really close. You could see if they're doing anything. And so I looked him up, and there was a Theology on Tap coming up. And it was a pro-life Theology on Tap. Wow. So one of the actors from the movie Unplanned was going to be there to speak. And so I'm like, okay, well, let's go check this out. This should be interesting. Because I'm pro-life now, and I want to talk about this stuff. And I want to get to know these people. And so we went and, circled the building, trying to find a place to park. And we finally got inside, and there's this big old long line leading into the back room. And so we stand behind these 3 or 4 women that are talking. And I asked one, I'm like, is this the line for Theology on Tap? And she's like, yes. And we just started chatting. She's so nice, so talkative. Talked to us the whole time, sat with us. And I just loved her, and I loved everyone I met. They were so kind. And, I loved all my skeptics friends. They were really cool and nice and interesting, but I felt like these people just had a different kind of joy. And it was really exciting. And different kind of energy, much more positive energy. So that's what really got me excited about Catholicism. And I just started learning more on my own. And honestly, I think I became a Catholic before I became a Christian. It was like, I just wanted to be Catholic because it's like, I just love these people.
That's awesome.
I love that so much.
And actually, the woman that I met was Meg.
Yeah.
I had a feeling.
Yeah.
She was so enthusiastic and sat with us.
She was great.
Meg,
Yeah, I love
I
her.
think she was holding a baby a lot of the time. Like, she was chatting
Probably a
everyone
small
up.
baby.
Yeah.
No, so I texted her when I was in RCIA, and I was just like, "Would you like to be my sponsor?" And so she accepted.
That's awesome. That's really great. What I love about just what you just said right there is sometimes I feel like I have to evaluate, am I representing the faith well? Because you just never know who's kind of getting that impression of Catholicism from you. And when you said, that different kind of joy, that's not happiness in that sense. It's like a spirit thing.
Yeah.
It's a Holy Spirit thing. So that's really awesome.
Very, very, very different. Yeah. And so another big thing that happened, which you talked about a little bit, was the Merciful Moment retreat. I don't know how I saw it. I think it just was probably in the bulletin or something because it was at my church. At St. John's. And so I wanted to go and meet more of these joyful, awesome Catholics. So like I said, emailed and asked if I could come. I felt really weird. I felt like everyone was going to hate me. I thought Christians hated atheists. And maybe it was like a projection thing because we kind of was hateful towards Christians.
Knowing, I knew you were in RCIA, and I knew you were still discerning whether or not you wanted to become Catholic when I met you. But I didn't know that you were still, considered yourself an atheist at that time. So now that even the fact that Alicia and I invited you to go to adoration with us, even as and you went, I love how open you were to trying things, even though you weren't so sure about them. That trust that we talk about, how we need to trust God. I know you were still kind of uneasy about going in, but you still trusted Alicia and I enough. You just met me and you knew Alicia through Facebook, but you trusted us enough to take you somewhere. And that's what we talk about when we talk about trusting God and trusting, where He's leading us and everything. And you had that trust. It's really interesting to see through your story how God's been working through you the whole time. Yeah. It's just, His timing had to be where you were. And,
That was a big day for me, by the way, you guys. You guys had a big impact on me that day. Because, I was still an atheist. I was still calling myself an atheist. But I was starting to notice things. Weird things. I called them coincidences. I started writing them down in a journal that I just called my Journal of Coincidences. It morphed into a God Moments journal later on.
Later to be titled her Saints Memoirs.
Right. But I just started noticing crazy things. One of the things was I was listening. I had started listening to Christian music. I was really trying to immerse myself. And I started listening to Christian music on the radio. And so I was listening to it on the way to your retreat. And the song The God Who Stays came on. And so that was in my head during your retreat. And there was a point in your speech. Call it a speech? I don't know. Your presentation. There was a point during your presentation where you repeated the phrase "God stays." God stays, a few times, and I was just it really perked me up, and I was just wait, what? It just felt like I was being sent a message, and there were a few moments like that during the retreat. And then Stacy, you got there a little later, so that was after I told the table I was an atheist. So I was kind of oh, she's gonna hate me when she finds out. But yeah, and then you guys wanted to go to the Adoration Chapel, and I remember asking, Alicia asked me, do you want to come with us? And I'm like, sure, what's that? I had no clue what that was. I knew what the Eucharist was and all that from my research. I didn't know the host was kept in a chapel for, perpetual or adoration for prayer. So it's not like I was totally lost when she told me what you guys are doing, but it was a brand new experience, and I was fascinated. So, I went in, and I just kind of sat there and thought. I don't even remember if I prayed or not. 'Cause, I think I was trying to get myself to pray by that point to see if it would work. Work on me. But just thinking about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist during that, and just wow, these people really believe. They really believe in this. And so that had an impact on me. And then after that, I got addicted to the chapel. I started going every chance I could get. I don't know what it was because it's not like I felt comfortable there. It wasn't like, I wouldn't say it wasn't peaceful, but like I'm such an anxious person, and going to new places that I'm not familiar with, where there might be people around, makes me very uncomfortable. And so it's not like I was drawn there because it was comfortable. Something was drawing me there still. So like every time I went to RCIA, I would go, either before or after. Sometimes I would just randomly stop by the church to go and pray there. And so I think that was a big, big thing that you guys did for me. So thank you.
I'm listening to your story. I'm so amazed at how you don't even know it's the Holy Spirit that's like guiding you during this time. You're just like, oh, I'm drawn, so I'm going.
Yeah.
Or, like I'm trying to pray, so here I am. I'm going to do this. And I feel like you recognize the activity of the Holy Spirit in those actions more than a lot of us do, probably, that have been, we were like, is that the Holy Spirit? And we push him to the side. But you're just like, I'm on this journey. And it's this amazing openness that I think is, listening to your story, Tiffany, it's just so amazing how you are acting on the Holy Spirit's promptings, and you didn't even know that that's the Holy Spirit, but you're just so open on this journey that you are following wherever he leads. And I feel like that for me, sometimes I sit here and I feel like I'm a loser, that I'm ignoring some of the promptings of the Holy Spirit, but listening to you, just being so open to be led on this journey, is really inspiring.
Something that I thought was so beautiful as I listened to your story, kind of from start to finish, are all these little ways that I can see God moving in your life, even from the time you were a little kid, all the way to up until now. The fact that you were moved away from that town where that occult influence was really a cloud over your life, that probably felt terrible to you. Your parents had no idea that was a God thing, but indeed it was. The fact that you met the people you met when you met them, the fact that you were in a degree, by its very nature, encourages immersion in a culture, and it was that skill that you used to return to the church by immersing yourself in that culture, like a true anthropologist. So I think it's just so beautiful to see how God has just quietly stood beside you, letting you be you, letting you fall, letting you stumble, but safely, but coming behind, and always, it's almost like he was always there. So when you say, I am the God that stays, he did indeed stay through all of it, even though I know there were probably heartbreaking times where you did not feel his presence or think that he cared about you. That's the hardest part of reconciling this, in spiritual direction. One of the tools that we ask is, go back to the parts of your life where there was trauma. Where was God? And that, it's a healing process that we go through. And I'm sure you'll encounter that as you go deeper into your interior life and as you begin to grow more. But I just think once again, I'm invigorated by your story. I'm invigorated by everything, all the little things that you said and didn't say. And the way that you approach the faith, like Noelle said, is incredible. The fact that what converted you was joy. Do you hear me, listeners? We all should be so convicted by that the very people who brought somebody from a disbelief in God, the very thing, that brought someone from a disbelief in God to conversion, wasn't in fact all the study of every world religion and combing all the knowledge and all the apologetics. What changed was the joy that allowed God to communicate himself to you. Like, that's what I'm seeing. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I totally like autobiography this really, but I just...
You need to come do a guest post on my blog. Better than I could.
Can I borrow that phrase that you said, a different kind of joy? Yeah. Because I've been looking for a title for my own blog. That's what I want it to be. I just think
So what was your experience like finally going through the sacraments, getting to receive the sacraments? What was that for the first time? Because a lot of us don't remember the first time that we experienced a sacrament,
Well, sometime during this process of going through RCIA,
I stopped calling myself an atheist. I finally, the biggest hurdle for me was believing in God. That was the biggest thing. And I didn't even realize it, and it was Beth who helped me realize it, because, we were chatting a lot, and I kept calling myself an atheist. And at one point, she's just like, Tiffany, I think it's time for you to start calling yourself a former atheist. And I was like, so it got me thinking about it, and it got me back to that question that I asked myself before when I went from agnostic to atheist. It was just like, okay, well, I don't know for sure yet, but what do I believe right now? And I realized, well, okay, I guess I do believe in God. I hadn't even really put it into words yet, but her asking me that just made me actually analyze my current state. Okay, I guess I'm a theist. But now I need to figure out, do I believe if Jesus is divine? Do I believe all these other things that come with that? So there were more struggles, but it was a conversation actually with Meg and Jim on the phone that really pushed me over the edge and made me decide that I'm going to join the church. And my final question, it seems silly now, but it was just like, well, I have all these doubts. Does the church want me? Can I join still? Because I honestly wanted to see if baptism would affect me and help me believe. I wanted to see if confession would work. I wanted to see if all these things would actually have an impact. But it was just like, well, I don't want to be a liar. I've always been an honest person. And it's like, I don't want to join telling you I believe when I'm not sure if I do. Can I? And Jim said something like, well, Jesus said you need faith the size of a mustard seed. I was like, oh, okay, I have that. And so he said a lot of other things to me too. Honestly blew my mind a little bit. It was saying things that had come up in my life. But so that's the moment that I decided, and that was in March, early March, right before the pandemic hit. I decided to join the church. Well, it was really cool because I think it was March 11th that I talked to, and I journaled all this. March 11th that I talked to Meg and Jim and decided to join the church. 2 days later, March 13th, I was at work, and it was the day before spring break. I work at a university, so we were about to be off for a week. And I was at work. We all had a meeting, which was unusual. In the front room, we were all meeting together, and the lights went out. And it was just dark in there, except for the windows coming from, we were in the interior of the building, so we kind of started wandering and trying to figure out what was going on. And we discovered that there was, I guess someone hit a power pole down the road, and it took out all the power to our work, and they weren't sure if they were going to be able to get it back on. And so there was talk okay, well, should we just stop for the day and go home, or are we going to have to come back? And they weren't sure, and I wasn't sure what to do. I was only a few minutes from home, but I felt like I didn't want to go home. So I went to the church, and I went to the Adoration Chapel. One of the things that Jim had suggested was that I read the Confessions of St. Augustine. And so I had pulled it up on my phone, on the library app, and hadn't touched it yet. But so I sat in the chapel, and I remembered someone telling me that sometimes they read in the chapel instead of pray. And so I just popped open the book because I didn't know what else to do. And the first sentence is something, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's something like, how great art thou, Lord, or something like that. And I swear, the day before, I was obsessed with that hymn. How great thou art. How great thou art? Is that what it is? I had heard it in a movie, and I wanted to hear all the versions, and I was playing it all day. And so the next day, to see that line in this book that Jim told me to read on the day that the power went out, and I'm in front of the Blessed Sacrament, it was just all very surreal. It was just okay, did I make the right decision then? It feels like this is a big thumbs up. So that was pretty cool. But then, of course, that was when they were talking about, well, there's this pandemic happening. We're not even sure if we're going to be remote. We're not even sure if we're going to be going back to work after spring break. And that was the last day that I was at work before the pandemic really hit hard here. And we had to start remote work. And my RCIA classes got kind of weird. I think we started doing some Zoom stuff, and I think we skipped a couple sessions. And I was supposed to join the church at Easter, but that got pushed off. And it was well, we don't really know when it's going to happen. So, man, it was frustrating to have made the decision to join the church, and like I was excited to get baptized and see if it was going to do anything to me. And they kept trying to warn me like it's not magic. but I'm like, but what if it helps? And so it was so hard to wait, but we finally got to do the sacraments of initiation on Pentecost Vigil, which was a really cool time to join the church, I think. I got excited and like researched all about Pentecost. So back to your question, you asked, what did it feel like to get the sacraments? Yeah. I think I just was noticing, like, I was expecting, something, I don't know what, something glorious and exciting to happen. Magic, I guess. It wasn't that. And so I was just noticing things like the senses, like how warm the water was. And I was noticing the taste of the host, and I was just kind of waiting for something to happen, I guess. And then, afterwards we went and we met up with some people, and I think Father Alex asked me, so how does it feel? And I really didn't know how to answer him, but I had a huge smile plastered on my face all evening. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. And I realized that later. I'm like, I'm just really joyful now. It's like, it wasn't like a moment where I just went from not happy to happy. It was just kind of like a slow realization that I'm just really joyful now.
So we've talked a lot about your conversion story, but you also have the blog A New Eve. Where did you come up with the idea for your blog?
Oh, okay. So I wanted to, I was really excited about being Catholic finally, and I wanted to give back, and I really wanted to help with the next RCIA class. So that was kind of my plan, but, talking to my husband and really thinking about it, we realized it was going to be just really hard because my youngest son is very difficult to get down to sleep, and that's right around bedtime. So it just wasn't going to work. So I was like, okay, I'll take the year off, and maybe next year I'll help. So I was bummed because I really wanted to keep talking to people about it, and I really want to keep learning about it. And I didn't really know how to do that. There wasn't anything that worked with my schedule. I can't remember what exactly triggered it. I guess I just knew several people who had blogs. And just one day I was just like, well, what if I start a blog? I mean, that could be a way that I can... Oh, and I guess Beth told me at one point, hey, you should really share your testimony with people. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. So that was in my mind. I was just like, well, maybe a blog is a way that I can share my testimony and maybe keep learning and keep talking about it with people, whoever wants to come and comment and talk about it. And so it could kind of be like an RCIA on my own time. So that's how that got started. But then I realized that it was really, I did that for like 6 months or so, and it's been awesome. But then I realized, I really want more discussion. So I just recently started a set of forums on my website too. So there's the blog and there's forums. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying really hard to get people there to talk and actually have these in-depth discussions. I don't really feel like they're very productive on other social media platforms. I feel like on my website, that's not as intimidating to start a conversation about this kind of stuff. Really delve deep into topics and feel like you're not being judged. So hopefully I can get more people there.
That's awesome. Where can people find your blog?
It's anewieve.com. So ANEWEVE.com.
So get on over there and start some good discussions, listeners. Yeah. Generate some traffic there.
Yes, please. And I'm just trusting in the Holy Spirit to bring whoever needs to be there to the forums. It doesn't have to be like a massive... There doesn't have to be a ton of people. Even if... people keep telling me, even if I reach one person, it's worth it, and yes. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here.
We appreciate having
beautiful.
You. And so, again, our guest today was Tiffany Bryant. She is a blogger for A New Eve. You can check out her blog, or she says she's off Facebook, but she's on Smart Catholics, which is a Catholic social media forum. We're just so happy to have her today, and we hope that her story touched some of you and help you guys see the Holy Spirit working in your own lives. And as always, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Please join us again in 2 weeks.
Until then, may God bless you and may Mary accompany you.